All right, can you hear me now? Excellent. So who here is involved in security incident response? We've got a good number of players. Who here is involved in security risk assessment and all that management that goes with it? Okay, so who does both? There you go, not very many. Our dilemma was somewhat like this. We're passionate people, all of us in the room. We're trying to present something that people might find a little boring. So we're going to do our best to make a good show today. And what we're going to focus on really is bringing a risk-based perspective to security incident response. I'm Keith Jonah, and
I'm Kevin Pietersma.
Very good. All right, warning. We're actually not here to go through a full security incident response process. That's really not our focus. Ours is a bit more kind of focused, on but how to bring a risk perspective to it. We will talk about kind of a general security incident response process, but we're not here to pitch it per se. But we have a really good presentation for next year, if you'd like to see that one. So, sorry. Oh, sorry. Speaking into the mic. So here we go. Concept, and unfortunately we don't have a different screen down here, but we'll wing it. The concept of risk decisioning during security incident handling. That's what we're trying to bring to the stage. And we're doing a bit of a test. Where's Alan? Alan, this is for you. If I had 2 to 5 minutes to give my presentation, I would do it in the following manner, just so you know, just watch. But we would start with input. And really what we're going to talk about is quantifiable measures, if you will, of impact and the degree of compromise at a point in time. And really there's 3 perspectives that we're going to look at. Potential impact, as set by a business unit prior to the incident. Current impact, in situ. You're right there, you're dealing with the shit, and you're trying to figure out, how bad is this? What's my impact at the moment? And also, what's my degree of compromise? So those are going to be 3 things that we're going to talk about in a great deal of detail. The outcome of this risk decisioning process, though, is we call it the SI severity level, which is probably one that everybody tries to use, because when you're doing security incident response, you're always going like, I lost a laptop over here. I've got a mail thing coming in here spamming me. I've got, I think it's Russia coming in through here. The attack vectors are all very different, but we're always trying to figure out, yeah, but how bad is it? How much energy should I put? How much priority should I put? So that's the challenge. You need to select a level of response. You got to figure out how fast, how many, do I call out the guards, like what do we do? We need to determine who should I tell in our chain of people who send us money every month, in terms of the notification addressees, as well as the schedule of updates, because by law and other aspects, sometimes you have to have very timely materials going out to people to say, how bad is it, what are we doing about it, and so on. And finally, we also have to set what's the seniority of the people who should be on the CERT team to respond to this. And those things might change over time. If we only had 5 minutes, Al, I would give you 2 slides. One, we'd throw up this slide and say, it's a risk model, and we're bringing risk to security incident response, and we'd throw up this slide, and this is what we do about it, okay? But we're not here, and we do have slightly more than 5 minutes, okay? So what we're going to do is I'm going to turn to Kevin for a minute, and we're going to start slower and say, well, let's start with what we'd like you to take away, and then we'll work our way back. Kevin, over to you.
Sure. When you think about it, if it's a risk assessment, what you're really doing in an incident handling situation is it's a live TRA. You're sitting there wondering, you don't really care who's attacking you per se. You don't even know necessarily. But what you want to know to stop the damage is, what's the potential impact? What am I trying to do here? So you're on the fly doing a threat risk assessment. So we came up with the concept of something we call SICON. It's the security incident condition. It's a value, it's a floating value that is changes over time based on your feedback, your investigation, your triaging, everything that you're doing. And then the severity level is something where you kind of go, is the sky falling? How fast? Because you're not going to handle every incident the same way, right? You're not going to handle something that is like an email threat the same way you handle a huge DOS attack, right? So you have to have a way of kind of grading these attacks so that you can throw the proper resourcing, proper seniority at these things. And the other thing that we came across was in the traditional incident handling models, what I found was it's very linear. you go through these phases, and heaven forbid reality actually kick in. I remember one time I was doing an incident, and I can talk about this now. It was the Ontario government's primary DNS server. Tim, where are you? Anyways, it had been compromised, and while we were doing the investigation on the DNS server, we find out, oh, wait, this isn't the first person who's been here. We now have 6 other people on here. So all this triaging that we're doing, everything we're doing was for, oh, crap, now we have to go back to Go, start re-triaging, because now we have multiple incidents really on the start. So it's not like a straight linear fly-through where you have one incident and you're just able to deal with that. Sorry, that's what happens with life when you're busy making plans, right? So instead what happened was we had to get into this thing where we had to go back to Go, and we got into this multiple iterations, and it was not like this thing where we went straight through it. The other concept that we came across was this notion of a security incident ticket. Sometimes it's actually the IT team that you're investigating. So you don't want to have your security incident ticket in their system. It's like, emailing an email blast when email's been compromised. It's kind of stupid. So if you want to keep the IT team out of the loop, you got to have a separate ticket system, in some way that it's air gap from them where they have no way of getting at it. And then finally, with the traditional models, I also found another thing is they have this phase called eradication and whatnot, and containment. There is no such thing if you lost a laptop. So you have to have a framework which is flexible enough that it can handle all types of security incidents, not just the ones that are IT based.
Sure. Question.
Yes.
Questions relating to your security incident ticket and air gapping it.
Yep.
Oftentimes, your CERT team, because you're bringing skill sets in from different parts of IT, they are part of IT anyway.
They are, but you can be selective about who you have, right? And not only that, there's always a risk in anything you do. Yes, you could actually be inviting the person who is at the root of all of this into your inner circle. Absolutely. This is not perfect, but that's the best that we can do, right? I don't have all the answers, but the thing is that you have to have a certain level of trust about who you bring in. And it's the most senior people, and you look at it and kind of go, would they be motivated to do that or whatever? No. It's probably someone that, you just did some downsizing, and that person was one of the people going out. So this person who's still here, you have to trust at a certain point, right?
Sure. Thank you. We're putting up some definitions, but we're not expecting you to read them. It's just more for us to today have a bit of taxonomy to work with. So recognizing that, if you will, coming in the front door is typically the adverse event. You're not sure what to do with it. It may or may not be a security incident. You have, we're going to explain our security incident condition, which is really a rating system for how badly are you compromised, as well as the SI severity level in terms of how to prioritize what I should do about it next. But what we eventually lead ourselves up to typically is that we're really arriving at, we have a security breach, and then we get into the discussion of, is it a material breach yet or not? Material being, it's very significant. But those are there for your kind reading after, I guess. But what we wanted to do was just introduce now, if you will, the general framework. And all the friends that know me know everything starts with a circle. So we have a nice life cycle circle. And I'll let Kevin just walk through it.
This is at its highest level. The purpose of this one is to show that it's not just a one-time walkthrough. It is a self-healing mechanism or self-improving mechanism. So we go all the way around through all the different phases. We might muck about in this phase for a little bit because we have the non-linear starts. And that's where it's like all of a sudden you discover, wait, someone else is in there too, and you have to go back to Go, and you have to accommodate to the new realities before you can actually get through this whole understanding of what you're dealing with, right through to the close, post-mortem, and then you evolve it. And again, with the whole thing with the SciCon is we have these differential levels of severity. So does everything go through a post-mortem? No. I mean, if it's an antivirus thing where you wipe the station, it's a BAU type of activity. Do we need a post-mortem? No. Close, we always have to close, but the point is, when it's appropriate, we have this self-improving mechanism over time.
Great. Now, when Kevin and I were developing this, we went through, of course, many different layers of detail. The second is just to start to get the idea how they're interlinked and the types of processes that happen between them. You'll also notice that there are sometimes bars that go all the way across. Those are activities that occur in all the phases. Yep, thank you. In terms of the different people involved, as well as up on the far right, you see as well the outcomes in terms of your problem management, risk management, and so on that might be contacted post this incident. We go another layer of detail. This is not for us to walk through today. And just for the eye candy, trust me, we got all the details there. The point being is, though, we want to step back now. Okay, so we've established you have a security incident response process. Great. But now we want to bring to it a bit of a risk perspective. And what we need to do, though, first is we have to count on our organization having undertaken a couple of risk exercises prior. Hopefully before the incident has occurred. One of them is they've developed their own enterprise impact rating table, which we'll see in a moment as an example. And basically, your enterprise risk or one of your organizational groups might have done that and might have applied it in many of their business continuity or disaster recovery planning exercises, or through threat risk assessment exercises, which we're much more in tune with, right? In the sense that you've established I guess, an apples-to-apples way to look at your business assets and understand how important are they to you. The other thing is, though, out of the TRAs, the BIAs, and so on, that material goes into a database, hopefully the CMDB or your risk repository, either one, that are available to your security incident response and your SIEM teams. That's what's important. So that's pre-established, upfront, and available to your team. Here's an example potential rating table. Different organizations use different categories, but the common ones are financial, reputational, legal, and operational. If you ignore all the others and just focus on operational, it's like, how bad is it? Are we disrupting our services? Can we live to see another day type of thing? But what they do is we've established, in this case, 5 levels, if you will. And you can tell as you read through the different text, basically each level, it's more and more compromise, more and more damage. And what you're looking at in terms of the potential impact, that's the impact that the assessor does prior to an event occurring. So basically, every year they'll redo their BIAs or they'll undertake more threat risk assessments. They're establishing a potential impact. Should something bad happen, here's what we would do, right?
DR and BCP also feed into this. This is like your enterprise risk management team should be having this basic impact table already pre-sorted.
Sure, and it's used by all different groups, not just security. That's the other thing to know as well. Now, here's an example of, they've done a little area, they've established what are the, if you would call it more of the impact type of information about some of your critical business applications. And as we run down kind of that middle column, you can see the potential impact going from high down to low. You also see on the far right, they've looked at also confidentiality, integrity, availability aspects, the normal kind of things you would come out of a TRA or a BIA. But that's going to be something that's available to your team if something occurs. Now what we're doing, we're just going to take a moment just to kind of sidestep and say, okay, now let's step back out of the SIR mode for a moment and just talk a little bit about the risk model. This risk model should look familiar. It's been around forever. It was actually a Canadian invention that went on to become part of NIST and which is now part of ISO, but we've modified it a little bit on top. You'll see the common things on the right-hand side. We have the potential impact of our assets. We also have between each of them, there either results in compromise or whatever. But the key components here are we protect things through our safeguards. We have assets that have a sensitivity. The vulnerabilities that remain, even though we put all our energy into creating great safeguards, there's still vulnerabilities that occur, whether it is within a product, when we try to combine products, or other, or even design within code. We have the bad guys outside, the threat agents, who operate different types of threat scenarios upon us. But at the end of the day, from a security incident perspective, though, incidents occur, right? And what we're going to see in a few minutes, we mentioned SICON in there, which is really, if you will, in this context, a little bit like likelihood. But it's the likelihood of how bad is it going to get next kind of thing. And if you will, above, on the very top, we have the SI severity. So we know how severe is this incident coming out. And then what do we do about it? So it's triaged to the left. We try to do containment actions. We move on to the responses are developed. And we move into eradication and recovery and back to should we improve our safeguards. So it's a nice model. But now it's starting to involve not only your typical security risk, but now also your security incident response as well. Okay. What we want to do now is we're going to step into, okay, we're out. we're on our SIEM every day, and an adverse security event has occurred. Kevin.
Sure, whether you've outsourced your SOC to like Toilet and Douche or Lyrical or any other organization, doesn't really matter. Actually, if they use the rating method that we have, it would actually perfectly dovetail right into this, and they could if they had that available to them. So we would highly recommend that your incident handling talk to your outsourced SOC or your in-house SOC just to make sure that you standardize. But here we're at the phase where we know something's going on. We haven't declared anything yet. It's an adverse event. You don't want to declare too early. The thing about declaring early, as soon as you declare an incident, in many cases, you're now bound by certain regulations to actually disclose that, right? So you want to be very careful about doing your proper diligence before you actually come to that point. So the way we handled that within our framework was we had something called a notional incident, security incident. So the SICON has basically three phases. There's a notional value, then there's a declared value, and then there's a closing book value. So you have the opportunity to sort of have a formal number out there where everyone can latch onto and sort of go, okay, what condition are we at right now? And if you remember that movie War Games, how they had, DEFCON 1 and whatever, like, I know that's reality, but if you think about that, that was like the first time that concept was introduced. We're sort of introducing SICON now as sort of an incident rating on how much you want to be paying attention to it at any given time.
Sure. We're going to jump through because I know we're going a little slow today. Al will laugh. However, once we make it to the triage phase, what we're going to do first is we're going to look at not the potential impact, but now we're going to look at what is the current impact to my financial, reputational, legal, or my operations. So that's where the typical CERT analyst is going to be working with ops to understand how bad is our operations affected. We're 50% down, our disruption of this, and so on. And so this is actually the current. So we've got our potential, but now we've got the current impact, which is important. And now we get to the SICON. So SICON really, as Kevin was explaining, is really about how badly am I compromised right now. And this is devoid of who's doing it and how they're doing it. This is simply, this is where we are. And it starts at the bottom, which is typically the very low phase is typically used as our way out of the whole system. But if we start at the low, you're looking at localized known malware infections or significant vulnerability or threat agents identified. Doesn't mean they're doing anything yet, but they've been identified. Next layer up, suspected deliberate attacks or reported by a non-trusted source, because sometimes we're listening to our outside agencies and so on. Some people you trust more than others. That's all. Or there's a widespread known malware infection going on, or confirmed non-deliberate attacks as well. And up we go the chain to the point of where we get to very high, you realize that we have a confirmed security breach, or a confirmed deliberate or non-deliberate attack with imminent breach if action is not taken. So those are the different kind of levels, and that's in a sense, our condition rating that we've provided for our level of compromise.
It's important to note that one of the things we did different than traditional frameworks is this isn't threat-based, this is impact-based.
Typically next, you'd be moving into a validation phase where you've got those two pieces of information. And what we're going to do next, though, is we're going to look at this, how do we bring it all together? And sometimes the best thing to do is you realize we started with, we have this database of potential impacts. We have a SICON, so we've now established that our current level of compromise is at level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we also know what our current impact that we're having as a result of this. Those basic factors come into play into this matrix that we've created. I know it's got a lot of colors, but it actually works quite easily in a sense. The first left-hand column really is the assessed potential impact. If you follow across, the next column is the actual current impact that you're experiencing. And the third one is simply what is your level of compromise at the moment. And by just following across the lines, you arrive at a value. And within the cell, depending upon which SICON value you arrive at, you end up with a number. That number is your security SI severity level. Okay? And it's just as easy as that for the people to walk through as soon as they have those three pieces of information. You come out and you have an assigned SI severity level. Okay? With that in hand, and you've established that you are dealing with a security incident, you move quickly into the mobilization phase. And that's really where you start to make use of that SI severity level to help you make decisions very fast. Because in these times, You can't sit down and go like, I don't know who to call. Who should you call, Kevin? I'm not sure. You need a plan, and the plan is driven now by this SI severity level. And the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to establish, based on it, what is the right type of response to take. And again, we have 5 levels. Pretty much all the ratings have the 5 levels, starting with, again, we skip 5 because that's our way out of the loop. But BAU response, it's just our daily compromise, of email systems or whatever. Timely response to priority response to immediate and continuous response. And each of the levels is defined, and it, in a sense, justifies what type of energy, i.e. money, people, etc., should be put against it. The other factor that the SI severity level also drives out are your types of notifications, to which distribution lists, and how often. Often, again, in the fog of war, you're all trying to fix the problem, but we forget we got to talk to ops, we got to talk to the business, we got to talk to, at a certain point, auditors and outside. So again, this really is helping us, that one severity level is telling us exactly what to do next.
Exactly. It's formulaic. Now it takes discretion out of the hands of like level 1 analysts who are dealing with this sort of stuff. There's no discretion anymore per se. It basically gives them parameters within which they have to make decisions. Once those things are done, it becomes formulaic where now they have an exact understanding of how they reach a certain severity level, and it's standardized and it's repeatable.
Sure. And one of the other factors that we mentioned earlier on was the severity level of your incident also determines what level of seniority is required within your CERT team. So we have yet another matrix where we actually broke down the different types of roles, and these are virtual roles. So we work with the idea of a virtual CERT team. It's basically driven out like when you need it, and there's certain people who've been trained and so on.
Meta teams.
Exactly. And so for each of the phases, once you've established your level of security incident severity, again, this matrix tells you that, I'm sorry, but Bob is too junior to be put in charge of this. We need this person, and so on. And it just goes up the chain. We also have a distribution list, which is driven out by the same approach. Again, your security incident severity level means that, for this one, we don't need to bother the CISO. But at a certain point, you're going to have to. And also business owners and so on. So again, the severity level is now driving all these decisions. So you are acting on impact decisions, which is really helping you to come around to risk.
And just to close the loop on what you're talking about, level 5s are way out of the loop. Sometimes something becomes non-material or it was a false positive. The reason we keep that there is for tracking purposes, for metrics and measures. Because if you're getting your SOC feeding you a bunch of false positives, you want a way of tracking that as well, right? So it's non-material to the actual incident, but you still want to know those metrics.
Sure. Yep. And the final kicker to this is, just to bring it all together and show those first different diagrams. But we knew what the inputs were: potential impact, SICON, and the current impact. We know how we came up with the SI severity level, and the outcome of it is that drives immediately who are we going to assign to this CERT, what level of responsiveness must we enact upon right away, what types of notification schedules do we have to do first for the initial as well as for follow-up, and also who has to be notified. Okay? And so, if you will, that kind of, and I think we made it within 20 minutes. We did pretty good, Al. But we'd like to ask if there's any questions. And of course, we have lots of eye candy, but let me open the floor. And thank you again for your patience this afternoon. Hi.
Yes, I'm looking at both cards. It seems fairly complex. Do you think we remember that? Or is there anything to
The trick is the idea of introducing, if you will, a lot of those tables and matrices was actually to make it very easy for the CERT team, who doesn't operate every day as a CERT team, to actually step right in and go, okay, I need 3 things going in. My potential, my current, and my SICON. They turn to the matrix and is, okay, here's what I'm going to do next. I notify these people with this schedule. I bring on these people to the CERT, etc. So its purpose was actually to facilitate versus making it too complex. The complexity is behind how we set it up, but actually how it runs with the CERT team is actually very straightforward.
And there's some operational pieces that go to that we don't show, is like pre-templated communications and stuff like that, which support these interactions. So this kind of gives you the framework, but it's not necessarily the operationalization of it.
And we've got time for one more question.
Do you typically
The idea of this was that it could be applied to basically any CERT or any SIR perspective. And what it does is it bridges between the geeky guys who are over here doing security threat risk assessments, but who don't actually do operations, versus the guys over here who are in the trenches every day monitoring the SIM, and then, oh my God, alert, and DEF CON comes up, and out they come. So this is actually meant to apply over anybody's EGRC or GRC processes or CERT processes.
It's a standalone process that has a lot of process hubs, so it runs in parallel with everything else, and what you have are these interactions between these different teams. So it's kind of the glue that binds.
Great. But thank you very much.